Hello and welcome. You're watching Money 9. I'm Sakshi Batra. Well, the budget speech is done and dusted and a lot to pour over the fine print. And we've been getting you the top voices from the corporate industry to understand what the fine print holds for you as a common person and you and I as an investor as well. Right now, we have a very special guest with us. Joining in is Mr. Shashank Srivastava, the Executive Director of Maruti Suzuki. So thank you very much for joining in on this very special day. First up, your first take on the budget. Is it has it delivered on the promise of being a 1 in 100 years budget?
I'm not sure about that 1 in 100 year thing, but definitely it looks growth oriented in the sense that there is a lot under the present circumstances. The government has committed to a lot of spend, especially in infrastructure and capital in the capital in the industry, because and especially in industry like infrastructure, which are both income multipliers as well as employment multipliers. And there hasn't really been increase in taxes either on the corporates or on to the individuals. And I think the money has been sort of be balanced by disinvestments and also by increased borrowings. That's why the fiscal deficit has gone up to about, I think, projected to be 6.6% next year. So in the current circumstances, I think it's been a good growth oriented budget so far.
So the growth oriented budget is what you believe that it was, but what was the biggest highlight for you? Was it the vehicle scrappage policy that you've already talked about in your pre-budget expectations with us on Money 9?
Yes, so on Money 9, I had earlier indicated two things. One, automobile industry, the fortunes are really dependent, long-term fortunes depend on the GDP per capita growth. There's a very high correlation with the GDP per capita income. So on that is a reason why we thought that anything which helps in the growth in the economy is good for the auto industry. Second, yes, on the demand front, we had said that a scrappage policy would be welcome, and I think the government has announced it, has announced that there would be a scrappage policy coming out shortly. So that's a very welcome step. Of course, we don't really know what that scrappage policy is at the moment, so it's so difficult to comment at this time what exactly that scrappage policy will entail for the industry. But it's welcome that there has been an announcement that the scrappage policy will come through.
Absolutely, sir, and that is what you had expected as well. Although the details will come, in a while, and we'll have to see what the road ministry also really has to say about this policy as and when the details find out. But overall, अगर लोगों को थोड़ा समझाने के लिए ये बात करें, क्योंकि ये पहली बार कंट्री में होने जा रहा है कि एक व्हीकल स्क्रैपेज पॉलिसी आएगी, तो इससे लोगों के लिए क्या बेनिफिट है, इंडस्ट्री के लिए क्या बेनिफिट है, ये थोड़ा आप विस्तार से समझाइए।
देखिए, स्क्रैपेज पॉलिसी में चूंकि वो अभी आई नहीं है, मैं इस पे स्पेसिफिक टिप्पणी नहीं करूंगा, लेकिन जनरल बताता हूँ स्क्रैपेज पॉलिसी से क्या हो सकता है। स्क्रैपेज पॉलिसी में क्या होता है कि जो पुरानी गाड़ियां हैं या जो ज्यादा पॉल्यूटिंग गाड़ियां हैं, उनको सिस्टम से बाहर निकाला जाता है। उनको वो देयरफॉर वहां पे एक रिप्लेसमेंट डिमांड जनरेट होती है, जिससे कि नई गाड़ियां बढ़ती हैं, इसलिए डिमांड फॉर न्यू व्हीकल्स विल गो अप। तो ये तो हो गया डिमांड क्रिएशन साइड ऑफ स्क्रैपेज। दूसरा ये कि पुरानी गाड़ियां एक्चुअली पुराने टाइम की गाड़ियों के हिसाब से फ्यूल एफिशिएंसी कम थी। तो पहले यूरो 2 और BS2 BS3 के नॉर्म्स होते थे, BS1 के भी नॉर्म्स के भी हैं 20 साल पुराने गाड़ियां जो ज्यादा फ्यूल खाती हैं, जिसकी खपत ज्यादा है, एंड एज ए रिजल्ट to run those vehicles which are less fuel efficient, they are more polluting, and they also drink a lot of fuel, which means your import bill on the fuel side goes up. तो वो दो एडवांटेजेस होते हैं अगर वो पुरानी गाड़ी रोड से निकल जाए और नई गाड़ी से रिप्लेस हो। एक तो नई गाड़ी का सेल होगा जिससे डिमांड बढ़ती है, दूसरा कि वो जो पुरानी गाड़ियां अगर सड़क से निकलती हैं तो आपके पास जो अब नई गाड़ी आएंगी वो ज्यादा फ्यूल एफिशिएंट है, और इस नजर से आपका जो इंपोर्ट बिल है फ्यूल का वो कम हो जाता है। ये एक बेसिस है स्क्रैपेज पॉलिसी का।
एब्सोल्युटली सर, साथ ही साथ इस बार जो थोड़े बहुत अनाउंसमेंट्स आए वो रूरल सेक्टर के लिए भी आए, जहां पर फंड्स एलोकेट किए गए हैं, और ऑटो सेक्टर के लिए बहुत बड़ा डिमांड का क्षेत्र ये ग्रामीण क्षेत्र होता है। तो जो अनाउंसमेंट्स आई हैं, क्या आपको लगता है ग्रामीण क्षेत्र से और ज्यादा डिमांड बढ़ती हुई नजर आएगी यहाँ से?
जी, मैं आपको एक चीज बताता हूँ कि जो अभी हमने पैंडेमिक के बाद में जो देखा, रूरल डिमांड की बाउंस बैक बहुत अच्छी हुई है। और हालांकि Q2 और Q3 में और जनवरी में अर्बन डिमांड भी बढ़ी है, लेकिन काफी डिमांड रूरल की अच्छी हुई है, क्योंकि वहां पे कोविड सेंटीमेंट इतना नेगेटिव नहीं था। दूसरा रबी क्रॉप इस बार की बड़ी स्ट्रांग थी, 150 मिलियन टन के आसपास थी, जो कि 6-7% ग्रोथ है ओवर प्रीवियस ईयर। खरीफ की बुआई बहुत अच्छी हुई है, मेरे ख्याल में 5.5-6% ज्यादा बुआई हुई है। मानसून 9% बेहतर हुआ है। तो इन सब के चलते हुए रूरल की डिमांड अच्छी है, और ये जो एडिशनल वो किया एलोकेशन इस सेक्टर के लिए, ये आगे आने वाले टाइम में हमारे को और अच्छे गाड़ियों के लिए भी अच्छा रहेगा। बाय द वे, द percentage of sale of rural in the rural for Maruti Suzuki has gone up from about 38% to about 40% this year already.
Okay. So that's a sharp increase already, and we are seeing an improvement in the rural demand as well, as far as the entire industry is concerned, and your company is also concerned. But many expectations were also building around, like you had also pointed out in our interaction earlier, sir, that the cost of acquisition of vehicles needs to come down, and we were hoping that at least the government would give some tax incentives this time around, so that people will have more money in their hands, so that they can go and spend on discretionary. That hasn't happened, but are there other announcements that could actually push people to go towards and buy cars out there?
Sorry, your voice was breaking. I think it was
So
a
basically,
connection
my
issue.
question to
Can you
you,
just,
sir, is yeah, sure. So basically, my question to you, sir, is this: that we were hoping for a whole lot of more announcements as far the auto sector is concerned. You had also articulated about how the cost of acquisition really needs to come down as well. Perhaps any announcement on the cafe norms as well. Nothing on that. We were hoping for some tax incentives so that it could boost liquidity in the hands of people, so that people would go out and spend on discretionary. Anything else that would actually push people to go out there and buy cars?
Yeah, so listen, there is a pent-up demand. That's why you see jump in car sales in the last 5-6 months.
Yeah.
On the issue which you just mentioned about the disposable income to go up, and therefore an incentive for consumers to go out and buy cars. Actually, what we have observed is after the pandemic, there has been a shift away from public transport and shared mobility to personal mobility, and that is a good boost for vehicle sales. And along with the pent up demand, I think that's the reason why we see some month on month improvement this year. However, remember that we are still way off from the peaks that we saw the year before last. So there is a lot of headroom, and I think I mentioned before, two things determine the automobile demand very, very closely. One is the GDP per capita growth, and second is the sentiment. So on the sentiment largely determined by COVID this year, I think there is an improvement at this point of time. And as far as the GDP per capita is concerned, I think a growth-oriented budget would definitely help. And I do hope that this budget, which seems to be growth-oriented, will help in that direction.
Absolutely. So a growth-oriented budget is, what you're really betting on this growth to actually do. But also, I wanted to understand from you, sir, going on from here, there were several announcements on infrastructure, which you also pointed out. There was some announcement on the agri-infra cess also, sir. So what does that mean, and will it have any impact in the auto sector?
Which one? Sorry.
The agri-infra cess on diesel and petrol. Yeah. So will that have any impact, sir? Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it was also mentioned by the finance minister that the final retail price of the fuel may not be affected. So you have in the fuel price, you have a excise duty, then you have a additional excise duty, then you have cess. At the moment, you have one cess, which is the road cess, and then you have now an added cess, which is the agri cess. So that is apparently been adjusted against those excise duty and the additional excise duty. So I think the net effect on the retail prices of fuel may not change. But you make a right point. Should the retail price change on the fuel front, then obviously it's a negative for the industry. But I'm glad that it was actually clarified that the retail prices will not be affected, because it would be adjusted. The additional cess would be adjusted against the excise duty.
Okay, understood, sir. So also anything else that you were hoping to see in the budget that did not come actually, and you would have been happier if otherwise?
Yeah, so we had said that maybe some out of the box thinking, like depreciation being offered to private consumers as also, just not alone the corporates, and also that the deduction of loan interest for car purchase for income tax purposes. But I think the government obviously has a lot of fiscal constraints. It's easy for me to talk about one industry as I talk about the auto industry. So I think they are the best judge how far to go as far as the expenditure goes on this.
Okay, and lastly, because you're on our show, which is called the Budget Report Card, we have to ask you, as per you, has the budget met expectations, exceeded expectations, or has been below expectations as per you?
So for me personally, yes, it was expected. Given the current situation, government had to boost expenditure. At the same time, could not have taxed for revenue. I think they have done that.
Okay, thank you so much, sir, for
Yeah.
speaking to us with your first thoughts, and we'll be पहले ही कट हो गया